Imagine you're in your garden, tending to your flowers, enjoying the peaceful morning air, when suddenly two massive pit bulls charge at you, their eyes wild, their jaws snapping. You scream for help, but no one comes in time. They don't stop. They won't stop. And the worst part, these dogs aren't just aggressive. They're high on cocaine. This isn't fiction. This is the horrifying true story of Jo Ann Echelbarger, a 73-year-old grandmother who was mauled to death by her neighbour's drug-fueled pit bulls while her helpless husband watched in terror. The warning signs were there, the authorities failed to act, and now a grieving family is demanding justice. But this raises bigger questions. Who's to blame when dangerous animals attack? The owners, the authorities, the breed itself? And most importantly, could this happen to you or someone you love? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will shock you to your core. Welcome to Savage Tales, Animal Encounters, the channel where we bring you the most intense, jaw-dropping and sometimes terrifying true stories of human-animal confrontations. From deadly predator attacks to unbelievable survival stories, we dive deep into the most shocking encounters between humans and the animal kingdom. Whether it's an unprovoked attack from a dangerous pet, a wildlife encounter gone horribly wrong, or animals acting in ways you never imagined, this is where you'll hear the raw, unfiltered truth. If you love gripping real-life stories, expert breakdowns, and edge-of-your-seat storytelling, you're in the right place. Before we dive into today's story, I need you to be a part of this journey. If you enjoy deep dives into the wildest, most terrifying animal encounters, do me a huge favor. Smash that like button. It helps this video reach more people who love thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and join the pack. This channel is growing fast, and you don't want to miss our next insane story. Ring the notification bell so you're always the first to hear about our latest shocking uploads. Drop a comment below. Do you think pit bulls are naturally dangerous, or is it all about the owner? Let's get the conversation started. Share this video because this could literally be a life-saving story. You never know who might need this warning. All right, let's get into it. Welcome to Savage Tales, Animal Encounters, where nature shows no mercy and neither do we. Jo Ann Echelbarger and her husband Stanley had only lived in their quiet Ohio condominium complex for a few months. They moved there seeking a peaceful, comfortable retirement, one where Jo Ann could spend her days gardening and enjoying the simple pleasures of life while caring for her husband, who was confined to a wheelchair due to dementia. It was supposed to be a safe haven, a community where neighbours looked out for one another. But what they didn't know was that just a few doors down, a storm was brewing, one that had been ignored for far too long. Living in the same condominium complex was Adam Withers and his mother, Susan. The two were known troublemakers, often stirring up conflict with neighbours and disregarding the rules of the community. But their most dangerous offence wasn't their attitude, it was their dogs. Adam owned two pit bulls, Echo and Apollo, large, muscular animals with a history of aggression. These weren't just any dogs. They were strong, territorial, and, as many neighbours had already experienced, completely unpredictable. Echo and Apollo were frequently seen roaming the common areas of the complex, unleashed and unsupervised. Residents had reported them multiple times to the authorities, complaining that the dogs were intimidating, aggressive, and a constant source of fear. The situation escalated when a resident's smaller dog was mauled and killed by Apollo in October 2023, a full year before Jo Ann's tragic fate. The court stepped in, issuing a September 11, 2024, order demanding that the Withers remove the pit bulls from the community. But instead of complying, Adam Withers brazenly ignored the order. His defiance was so extreme that he taunted building management on social media, posting cryptic messages like, "Never ask a pit bull owner to choose between you and their pit bulls because they will choose. And it won't be you." Neighbours were terrified. Complaints kept piling up, yet nothing was done. Then in late September 2024, the already dangerous situation took an even darker turn. On September 27th, police were called to the Withers home after receiving reports that Echo and Apollo had ingested Adam Withers' cocaine. Officers arrived to find a disturbing scene. Two large, unstable pit bulls acting erratically, their behavior wild and unpredictable. Body camera footage captured the officers calling the county dog warden for assistance, but no one responded. The very people meant to handle dangerous animals were nowhere to be found. This blatant negligence allowed Echo and Apollo to remain in the complex, despite their erratic behavior and history of aggression. The warning signs were glaring. The community knew, the police knew, the courts knew, and yet the dogs stayed. Adam Withers continued to let them roam freely. He showed no concern for the safety of others. He refused to leash them, ignored orders to remove them, and brushed off every complaint. To him, these weren't just dogs, they were weapons. That morning, Jo Ann Echelbarger stepped outside into the crisp autumn air. She had a small garden she loved tending to, a peaceful retreat in a world that sometimes felt overwhelming as she cared for her ailing husband. She knelt down, digging her fingers into the soil, adjusting a few plants and taking a moment to admire the changing leaves around her. A few doors down, Echo and Apollo were loose once again. The two pit bulls roamed the common area, sniffing around, their eyes scanning the space. There was no leash, no owner in sight. They had been allowed to wander unchecked, as they had so many times before. But today, something was different. Maybe it was the scent of a stranger nearby. Maybe it was the lingering effects of the cocaine they had ingested weeks earlier. Or maybe, after months of unchecked aggression, they were simply waiting for the right moment to unleash their fury. Jo Ann continued working in her garden, unaware that danger was closing in. The dogs turned the corner, their eyes locked onto her. They began to move, faster, closer, and then screams shattered the morning silence. The peaceful morning air was suddenly shattered by the sounds of snarling, growling, and blood-curdling screams. Jo Ann Echelbarger barely had time to turn around before Echo and Apollo lunged. The two massive pit bulls charged at her with terrifying speed, their powerful bodies launching forward in perfect unison. There was no hesitation, no warning growl, just pure, unrelenting aggression. The first impact knocked Jo Ann to the ground. She screamed as she felt razor-sharp teeth sink into her arm, clamping down with crushing force. She tried to yank free, but Apollo twisted his head violently, shredding the flesh. Blood sprayed across the garden soil. Before she could react, Echo latched onto her leg, dragging her across the ground. Her fingernails clawed at the dirt, desperately trying to gain some kind of grip, but it was no use. The dogs were too strong. Her husband Stanley sat just feet away in his wheelchair, watching in utter helplessness as the love of his life was ripped apart. His mind, clouded by dementia, struggled to process the nightmare unfolding before him. His voice cracked as he tried to scream for help, but his frail body couldn't move. Jo Ann fought with everything she had. She kicked, punched, thrashed anything to break free, but the dogs were relentless. Apollo released her arm only to lunge at her throat. His jaws closed inches away, missing the fatal bite by a fraction of a second as she instinctively turned her head. His teeth instead ripped into her shoulder, tearing through muscle like paper. Echo's grip on her leg tightened. The sound of bones snapping sent a chilling echo through the courtyard. Neighbours began to appear, drawn by the horrifying screams. Some stood frozen in shock. Others frantically dialed 911, their voices trembling as they tried to explain the unimaginable scene. One man grabbed a garden rake and ran toward the dogs, swinging wildly. The metal prongs struck Apollo's back, but the dog barely flinched. Instead, he turned his head, eyes black with rage, and snarled. The man hesitated, and in that moment, Echo lunged for Jo Ann's face. A sickening crunch rang out as his teeth clamped onto her cheek. The sheer force sent tremors through her entire body. She let out one final guttural scream, a sound so raw, so filled with pain, that it would haunt everyone who heard it. Sirens wailed in the distance. Help was coming. But would it be enough? By the time officers arrived, the attack had already lasted several agonizing minutes. Jo Ann was barely moving, her body mangled, her breath shallow. The first officer on the scene drew his gun immediately. "Get back!" he shouted, but the dogs didn't stop. A single gunshot rang out. The bullet struck Apollo in the shoulder. The dog yelped, staggered, but instead of running, he turned back to Jo Ann and bit down again. The officer fired again and again. This time Apollo collapsed. Echo, now covered in blood, backed away but didn't flee. He hovered over Jo Ann's broken body, his eyes locked onto the officer's, muscles still tensed to attack. The second officer didn't wait. He unloaded 2 more rounds into Echo. The pit bull finally fell lifeless beside his victim. But the damage was already done. Paramedics rushed in, but there was nothing they could do. Jo Ann had lost too much blood. Her body had endured too much trauma. Her final moments were spent in agony, with her husband watching in silent devastation. Stanley, too weak to move, simply sat in his wheelchair, staring at the lifeless body of the woman he had loved for decades, the woman who had cared for him, the woman who had promised to be there always. She was gone. Neighbours wept. Police officers stood in stunned silence. And the Withers condo, just a few doors away, sat undisturbed, its door closed as if nothing had happened. But the horror wasn't over. As investigators arrived, they uncovered a sickening truth. The dogs had a history of aggression. The community had warned authorities for months. The pit bulls had tested positive for cocaine just weeks earlier, and nothing had been done to stop it. Jo Ann's grieving family wasn't about to let this go unanswered. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit, targeting not just Adam and Susan Withers, but also the condo association and the county dog warden, who had ignored every red flag. Adam and Susan Withers were later convicted of involuntary manslaughter, their negligence leading directly to Jo Ann's horrifying death. But no amount of prison time could undo the pain they had caused. A once quiet neighbourhood was now forever marked by tragedy, and a family that had moved there for peace was left with nothing but nightmares. That is the question that haunts this case. If the authorities had acted, if the condo association had enforced the removal order, if the police had taken earlier complaints more seriously, if someone, anyone, had stepped in before it was too late, Jo Ann Echelbarger might still be alive today, but no one did, and now a beloved grandmother is gone forever. As we close out this tragic and chilling story, we're left with one undeniable truth. Preventable tragedies like this should never happen. Jo Ann Echelbarger's death wasn't just the result of a vicious attack. It was a failure of responsibility at every level. Now, her family is fighting for justice, and the big question remains, who should be held accountable? What do you think? Should dangerous dogs with a violent history be banned from residential communities? Should the blame fall solely on the owners, or should authorities and landlords face more consequences for ignoring red flags? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your take on this shocking case. Before you go, don't forget, like this video. If you found this story important or eye-opening, it really helps support the channel and lets me know you want more content like this. Subscribe to Savage Tales, Animal Encounters, so you never miss another jaw-dropping real-life story of animals and humans colliding in the most unbelievable, tragic and terrifying ways. Ring that notification bell so you're the first to know when we drop our next insane animal encounter story. Share this video with friends and family, because awareness is key, and this case raises serious questions about safety, responsibility and justice. Thank you so much for watching and being a part of this journey through the most savage, shocking and unforgettable animal encounters. Stay safe out there, and remember, in the wild and sometimes even in our own backyards, nature doesn't play fair. This is Savage Tales, Animal Encounters. See you in the next one.